Rio de Janeiro, 1952. A renowned physics professor enters his university lecture halls and writes a straightforward question on the chalkboard. What produces an angle inside a crystal? 80 students gaze back. Absolute quiet. He rephrases it differently. Still nothing. These are advanced physics majors who just passed their quantum mechanics test with flying colors last week. They should grasp this instantly. What Feynman uncovered in that lecture hall would reveal a flaw in education that continues to harm millions of learners even now. This story comes from Richard Feynman's own documented experience teaching in Brazil. Described in his memoir, "Surely you're joking, Mr. Feynman!" and confirmed by records at the Centro Brasileiro de Pesquisas (Físicas), the scientist who would eventually earn the Nobel Prize and transform our grasp of quantum mechanics, spent almost 2 years instructing in South America. He anticipated sharp intellects hungry to unravel the secrets of physics. Instead, he encountered something completely different. Feynman reached Rio in 1951 as a guest professor recruited to bolster Brazil's developing physics department. The institution featured up-to-date equipment-driven students and a syllabus brought straight from America's leading universities. On the surface, it all appeared excellent. The students showed up for every session, kept detailed notes, and devoted hours poring over books in the library. Their test results were flawless, perfect recall of Maxwell's equations, impeccable restatement of thermodynamic concepts. These weren't failing pupils. They were academic standouts, yet something seemed off. During his third week, Feynman illustrated polarized light with 2 calcite crystals. He displayed them, turned one, and observed the light intensity shift. Fundamental optics, introductory content. He requested the class to describe what they observed. Empty stares. "But you completed an entire term on electromagnetic waves," Feynman remarked, truly puzzled. One courageous student lifted his hand. "Professor, we covered electromagnetic waves. We never covered calcite crystals." That moment Feynman started to realize he wasn't teaching physics at all. He was observing something much more alarming. A flawless mechanism for blocking real learning while preserving the appearance of education. He created a test. In the following session, he asked students to state Brewster's angle. Hands flew up. They delivered the textbook wording precisely, including the mathematical expression. Remarkable. Then Feynman inquired, "Look at the bay through this window. Can you observe how light bounces off the water at various angles? Is Brewster's angle occurring right now?" Silence filled the room. They had committed Brewster's angle to memory so completely they could compose papers on it, yet they couldn't identify it happening 30 feet away. This pattern appeared across every subject. Students could quote Newton's laws, but couldn't clarify why a bicycle remains balanced. They knew the equation for kinetic energy, yet appeared baffled when asked about a ball rolling down an incline. They had studied physics the way someone might memorize phrases from a travel guide without comprehending the tongue. Feynman attempted various methods. He made questions easier. He employed actual items rather than abstract notation. He had them forecast simple results before doing any calculations. Nothing succeeded. The deeper he investigated, the clearer it grew. His students had devoted years to physics without ever truly thinking about physics. But here the tale turns more troubling. These students weren't idle. They weren't dull. They worked harder than most American students Feynman had instructed. They stayed up all night committing textbooks to memory. Their commitment was total. That was exactly the issue. Feynman began examining the Brazilian education structure outside his own classes. He visited other sessions, examined test papers, spoke with students from various institutions. What he found was a machine of intellectual destruction functioning on massive scale. Students learned that professors pose questions in foreseeable patterns, memorize the precise wording from textbooks, reproduce it exactly on exams, and you triumphed. Every reward favored memorization. Every evaluation prized recitation. The whole structure had developed to gauge the illusion of learning while actively obstructing genuine comprehension. One night, Feynman joined a group of engineering students preparing for finals. He observed them testing each other. "What is the definition of triboluminescence?" One inquired. Another student recited, "Triboluminescence is the light produced when crystals are crushed." Perfect response. Textbook definition. Feynman interrupted. Has anyone here ever observed this? Puzzled expressions. Observed what? Trebiluminescence. Light from crushing crystals. You can try it with sugar cubes in darkness. None had. They were memorizing the description of a phenomenon they'd never experienced, couldn't picture, and wouldn't detect if it occurred before them. Feynman understood these students were caught in what he later termed cargo cult science. They possessed every external trappings of learning without any real content. They owned the terminology of physics, but none of its strength. They could pass every exam yet solve no actual problems. You know this frustration when you've crammed for a test, passed brilliantly, then forgot everything a week afterward. That empty sensation when you realize you memorized your way through material without grasping any of it. Feynman's students lived this daily, yet the system assured them they were thriving. This wasn't merely about Brazilian education in 1952. This concerned the essential distinction between two kinds of knowledge. Knowledge that adorns the mind versus knowledge that reshapes it. The Brazilian students had collected facts like ornamental items. Each definition, each equation, each principle rested in their minds as a separate, disconnected fragment. When asked about Brewster's angle, they pulled out the Brewster's angle fact. When asked about reflection, they pulled out the reflection fact. But these facts never link it. They never created a network of comprehension that could handle new circumstances. True physicists think otherwise. They construct models, mental simulations of how reality functions. When Feynman saw light bouncing off water, his mind instantly performed physics. Not because he memorized light reflects at Brewster's angle off water, but because he understood electromagnetic waves, understood their interaction with matter, and could forecast results from basic principles. The students lacked models, they possessed scripts, and scripts only succeed when reality matches the exact situations you've memorized. Feynman tackled this directly in his final presentation. He stood before the gathered professors and students and gave what witnesses called a crushing analysis. He informed them their system created students who pass examinations, who pass them quite well, but in which we do not know anything except what we have memorized. The room exploded in defensive responses. Professors argued their techniques were valid. Consider the test scores. Students insisted they labored incredibly hard. How dare he claim they knew nothing? But Feynman wasn't criticizing their effort. He was revealing their tragedy. These gifted intellects had devoted years to a structure built to stop them from becoming scientists while persuading them they were succeeding. He stated it clearly in a remark that still echoes through education discussions. After considerable investigation, I finally realized that the students had memorized everything, but they didn't know what anything meant. Let that settle. They didn't know what anything meant. Every equation was a magic incantation. Every definition was hollow language. They could reproduce the entire textbook without grasping a single idea. This exposes something vital about how knowledge truly operates. Genuine understanding isn't about accumulation, it's about transformation. When you really learn physics, you don't merely gain new facts. You gain new ways of perceiving. Light ceases to be just light and becomes electromagnetic waves traveling through space. Motion ceases to be mere movement and becomes the interaction of forces, energy, and momentum. Feynman's students never underwent this transformation. They treated education as data input. Pour information into brain, retrieve information when required. But human minds don't function like storage devices. We comprehend through connection, through application, through observing concepts collide and evolve. The same principle applies today when you view tutorial videos at double speed, mock textbooks with various colors, or produce detailed notes you never revisit. You're creating the appearance of learning while evading the real effort, wrestling with concepts until they reveal their meaning. Modern education has refined the flaws of the Brazilian system. We have students who watch lecture recordings and believe they comprehend, then stall during exams. We have professionals who finish certifications without acquiring skill. We have whole sectors founded on courses that deliver certificates rather than abilities. The signs of superficial learning are everywhere. Someone can describe a concept to you, but can't address basic what-if scenarios. Someone's resume shows impressive qualifications, yet they can't resolve simple issues in their area. Someone has read scores of books on a subject, but their perspective hasn't shifted at all. You see this in yourself. When you realize you've studied something for months, yet still can't apply it. When you must search the fundamentals every time, when you can select the correct answer on a multiple-choice exam, but couldn't produce it independently. Feynman pinpointed the cause of this failure. The Brazilian students weren't constructing knowledge from fundamentals. They were memorizing the completed result. They learned outcomes without premises, results without derivations, equations without the reasoning that generated them. It's like attempting to comprehend a building by memorizing a photograph. You might describe its appearance accurately, but you won't understand why it remains standing, how loads distribute, or what occurs if a support is removed. Genuine learning begins with basic questions that require actual reasoning, not define electromagnetic induction. But why must a generator rotate? Not recite Newton's second law, but predict what occurs when I push this cart on a frictionless surface. Feynman used his final months in Brazil trying to illustrate this method. He brought malfunctioning radios to class and asked students to repair them. No equations permitted, just reason. He led them outdoors and required them to explain everyday occurrences using physics concepts. He prohibited memorized definitions and insisted on explanations in their own language. Some students resisted. This seemed more difficult than memorizing, and it was. Thinking always is, but a few began to break through. They experienced a moment's Feynman described as the pleasure of finding things out. That spark when understanding locks in and the world suddenly becomes clear. Those students discovered what it means to truly know something. Not to repeat, not to identify it, but to master it. To take a concept and examine it in your mind, probe its limits, apply it to unfamiliar situations, and claim it as your own. Here's what Feynman grasped that the Brazilian system overlooked. Learning is transformation, not accumulation. You don't truly know something until it alters how you view the world, until you can't see a rainbow without considering refraction, until you can't watch a ball fall without recognizing acceleration, until the knowledge becomes an instinctive, automatic component of how your mind works. This explains why cramming fails, why highlighting fails, why passive note-taking fails. You're attempting to accumulate when you must transform. You're adorning your mind when you need to rewire it. The students who break through share one characteristic. They stop asking, what should I memorize, and begin asking, what would happen if? They're the ones who set aside the textbook and attempt to rederive concepts from first principles, who tackle problems before checking solutions, who instruct others and uncover their own weaknesses. They're willing to feel foolish temporarily because they recognize that confusion is the raw material of learning. That struggle is where transformation occurs. That the discomfort of uncertainty is the price of admission to genuine understanding. Feynman departed Brazil with a reputation as a disruptor who failed to value the students' hard work. But decades later, his analysis proved prescient. The system he revealed in Rio persists everywhere. In universities that prioritize rankings over learning, in professional training that generates certificates instead of competence, in online courses that market the illusion of effortless expertise. We've constructed sophisticated mechanisms for sidestepping the difficult work of true learning while preserving flawless appearances. We've created a world where you can possess every credential and none of the ability, where you can study for years and comprehend nothing. But we've also confirmed Feynman was correct about the remedy. The students who break through share one quality. They refuse to pretend. They don't shelter behind memorized definitions. They challenge themselves relentlessly. They acknowledge what they don't grasp and remain in that discomfort until clarity arrives. They ask why until they hit bedrock. They articulate concepts to themselves so aloud. They pursue problems they can't solve and refuse answers until they've truly struggled. They recognize the difference between I've seen this before and I understand this deeply. That difference between recognition and understanding, between memory and mastery, is what Feynman revealed in that Brazilian classroom 70 years ago. The crisis he exposed never concluded. It simply adopted better disguises, which means the question he left lingering in Rio still awaits each of us. Are you learning or are you merely memorizing? Do you understand or do you simply recognize? Can you apply what you know or merely repeat it? The next time you feel confident you've learned something, try Feynman's test. Close all resources. Explain it to an empty room. Apply it to a scenario you've never encountered. See what happens when you're forced to reason instead of recall. That's where authentic knowledge begins, in the uncomfortable space between what you believed you knew and what you can actually accomplish. Feynman showed his Brazilian students that space. Some decided to cross it, most chose to overlook it. The decision is yours.